We are talking Alone in the Dark 2. This one from 2008. Now this is a sequel to the 2005 movie Alone in the Dark that was directed by Yune, and that one starred Christian Slater. They're both based on a kind of popular long-running video game series called Alone in the Dark, which, in case you were unaware, is somewhat similar to the Resident Evil series, although not quite as shooty and probably not as well known, if we're being completely honest. So Yune directed the original movie, and although he doesn't direct this one, he does produce it. It's directed by a couple of guys who have regularly worked with Yune, kind of behind the scenes, directs this one. Now, this movie is notable for an absolutely packed cast full of recognisable genre actors that I think most people on this channel will probably know. Now, although this is a sequel, it isn't a direct follow-on from the first movie. In actual fact, our main character, Edward Carnby, has actually been replaced here by Yune, originally played by Christian Slater in the original movie. Now, the story is as follows. We have Carnby getting mixed up with this kind of effectively witch hunters after he is stabbed with a kind of ancient blade that this particular very violent witch is after. And he is stabbed, which gives him some type of kind of telepathic link to this witch, and he ends up kind of teaming up with this group of witch hunters to try and kind of stop this immortal witch who is kind of coming for him because he has like this link. He also wants the dagger and members of this kind of witch hunting group, if that makes sense. And effectively it's trying to find out ways, various kind of puzzles and various characters along the way. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So as I said, you can watch this one separately from the original. There's no kind of through line outside of the Carnby character, but I would say this one is really not based on an actual storyline from the games, as far as I'm aware. The original one took some elements from the games, but it was largely the original story, but it did have, you know, took some story kind of points from it. This one is more or less like a completely original movie. So yes, it's a video game adaptation, but it is really only based off rather than adapting stories and stuff from the actual game series. Now, I have to say I didn't like the original Alone in the Dark movie. It's a long time since I have seen it, and I have not reviewed it. But I knew I didn't like it, but I can't really remember exactly why. But I had never seen the sequel, so this was a first time watch for me. So, what did I think? Was this as bad as I can remember the first one being? No, it wasn't, to be honest. I mean, this one is somewhat of a serviceable, low-budget kind of horror thriller. It's nothing special, if I'm honest. Like I said, the main thing here, I think, in the positive column here is the cast here with, as I say, many recognisable faces, albeit some of them are only kind of cameos. So just bear that in mind. But we do get a reasonable amount of screen time from the likes of Lance Henriksen, Bill Moseley and Ralph Muller. So yeah, but it's still a kind of a fun kind of little kind of genre Expendables list, so to speak. So that was kind of quite fun. The actual storyline, you know, it's kind of serviceable. These kind of group of witch hunters. It reminds me a little bit of the Blade Trinity movie, where we had those kind of group of kind of vampire hunters. It kind of feels a little bit like that, kind of joining forces with Carnby, who is a kind of separate kind of paranormal investigator. So it's kind of like that, just with a witch rather than kind of vampires to a certain degree. I mean, it's a serviceable story. They do try and kind of fold in elements like puzzle solving and just a little bit here. And there's a few kind of gunfights and things like that with this kind of witch who can effectively be ethereal and ultimately kind of unkillable with your kind of your standard weapons. It's you know, reasonably well acted. You have a kind of a good cast of veteran actors here, to be honest with you, because despite it being a U of A Bowl, you know, produced movie and obviously produced on the cheap, and probably quite a quick turnaround, I have to say I didn't think the acting was all that bad, because you do have, at the very least, experienced actors kind of on set here. There's some quite kind of fun sort of set pieces. This witch can only kind of come out in the dark and things like that. So there's kind of lots of you know, moments when the lights are failing and things like this. Will kind of give you the kind of the tension. The movie does have a almost as well as the Blade Trinity kind of feel. It almost has this kind of somewhat of an X-Files vibe to a certain degree, where it's kind of going, you know, like an investigation. What doesn't work in this movie's favour, I have to say, it really starts off quite poorly because there's no introduction. Now, if you have seen the original movie and you're watching this one straight after, I guess you know, you may be familiar with the character of Edward Carnby, but if you haven't, and I haven't seen that movie for a long time, you know, it doesn't really catch you up or catch up new viewers, which I think is a mistake considering the main role has been recast, even with a different ethnicity. So effectively it's more of a reboot, to be honest, and there's no real through lines, but it really doesn't kind of, I think, set the kind of the characters up, not least kind of the Edward Carnby character, but also our group of kind of witch hunters. So you kind of watch this almost like you've missed something. You think, what is going on? Because we're just introduced to a bunch of characters already halfway through doing things, and there's no real kind of like setup or kind of getting to know you know, the characters within the movie. It just expects you to kind of know it, which I think was a mistake for this movie. The kind of the VFX wise, I mean, it's a 2008 movie. There's a little bit of over reliance on kind of VFX, which haven't aged particularly well and are probably kind of quite cheap to begin with. There's some kind of logic issues here. Our witch hunters seem to be determined to try and shoot this witch, despite it never working, because this witch can kind of be intangible and things like that. So it's like, surely you would use more mystic elements to try. I mean, clearly you believe this is real. So why not use more mystical means to try and defeat this? It's why are we constantly trying to shoot it? The reason is because we want to have some action scenes, but it doesn't make sense really for the context of the kind of the movie, to be honest with you. And the fact that their lights are failing and stuff like that, surely you would have like multiple generators and bits and pieces, or you know, fire and things like this. Again, there's just some kind of lapses in kind of logic. I think the character of Edward Carnby, played by Yune, to be honest with you, he feels like a supporting character in his own movie. He's laid up in bed for like the first kind of like half of the movie, to be honest with you, after getting kind of stabbed. And I never really felt like he was particularly kind of proactive in the actual kind of movie itself, and feels more like a kind of like ensemble really than him kind of being kind of like the main sort of character. And to be honest, the movie is also maybe a little bit talky. Now, it had a considerably lower budget than the original movie, which was released in cinemas. So obviously they try to kind of save money by being more of a kind of a dialogue-driven movie, you know, which can work, especially if you've got, you know, a decent amount of recognisable actors here. But it ultimately is a lot of kind of just telling us about this kind of like the witch and things like that. A lot of exposition dumps. You know, we get a few glimpses and things like that, but I didn't really feel like it amounted too much, to be honest with you. So it ultimately becomes a little dull. Even when our cast go and do things, it's not really kind of all that spectacular in any kind of sense. Now, I don't think this is a terrible film. If you look at the likes of IMDb, it's going to give you a bad rating. It's serviceable. I would say it's below average, but it's not a terrible film. It's a kind of somewhat passable but forgettable kind of supernatural thriller with, you know, an interesting cast that's worth watching to a point just for that. But story-wise, it's not really doing anything you haven't seen before. It's not really breaking the mould in any way, but it's not a terrible watch. And as far as I remember, like I said, it has been a long time since I've seen the first one. I think maybe better than the first one, although we'd probably have to revisit it, to be honest with you. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Not terrible. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.